If you look at the Palestinians coming to South Africa visa free, it is through my contribution. 30 years they were not able to do that, while Israelis were coming to South Africa free with no restriction. If you talk about the problems that we were having in OR Tambo Airport, I'm the one that went there. I demanded to see the CEO and look at the video footage, which I did, to see whether they were deliberately marginalizing or victimizing our people, and put pressure on them. Our people are not having those problems anymore. Let's talk about the Russian-Ukraine war. I was the only one in the parliament that stood up and defended the Russians, because I know who the culprits are in this proxy war that's taking place. So when he talks about corruption, in the entire parliament, nobody were able to get the answers of how we took every aircraft of ours, 14 aircraft, SAA, and sold it for 35 million and rented it back for 44 million. And nobody wants to assist me with it. We've got the answers, how it was sold and who sold it.
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines, and shot on location at Kurtuba Convention Center.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another edition of In Conversation With. Today we're speaking to none other than National Freedom Party parliamentary leader Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam, one of the very vociferous and well articulated voices in parliament, especially over the last few months on the Gaza issue and many other issues. But that is not all that he has in his experience. Comes from the IFP, has been in parliament for almost a decade, and in the process of leading a new political party. Sheikh Emam, that's your surname, Ahmed Munzoor. Jazakallah khair for joining us, and shukran.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And shukran for having me on the air today.
I appreciate it. You flew up all the way from Durban just for this interview.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Your surname is Sheikh Emam. Just tell me, are you a sheikh or you're imam? Did you add that on there as a leader, or what?
I think let me clarify that, so that I don't get onto the way of any of the religious leaders we have in the country. Sheikh Emam is my surname. My grandfather was an imam when he landed in South Africa. I am advised, I've never met him, that he was the imam of the masjid in Isipingo Rail at the Jamadas, the famous Jamadas family. And that's where my surname actually comes from. So I'm not a sheikh, I'm not an imam.
But you have sheikh and imam, so you double.
Actually, double barrel, yes. Maybe I'm higher than the others.
When I see your performance in parliament, you are definitely double barrel. But I'll get to some of those things before. Tell me a little about you said your grandfather came to Sipingo, you're from Durban. How did you get into politics? You were in the IFP for some time. That's very interesting.
Well, let me say this first of all. It's very unfortunate that I've never had the opportunity of meeting my grandfather. But in order to keep his legacy alive, and that of my late father and his brothers, who were very instrumental and involved in Islamic affairs, having started the Chatsworth Islamic Society, the Miowent Islamic Society, and like I said, my late grandfather was part of the Isipingo Rail Masjid. We have now built a masjid in Sitsikama that's on the N2. It's 160 km past Port Elizabeth on the way to Cape Town. 70 km before Plettenberg Bay, 3 kilometers from the total garage and the big tree, Storms River Bridge. So alhamdulillah, that is what we've done to keep the legacy alive. Now, I come from a family of community activists. Like I said, my father and his brothers were very involved in Islamic work. My uncle was involved in the South African Football Association, Chatsworth Football Association.
Who was your uncle?
Muhammad Hanif. He also stood as a councillor. My father was a councillor on the Southern Durban Indian Local Affairs Committee many, many years ago. My brother has been the vice president of the South African Football Association, Mubarak Mohammed. He was also a director of the 2010 World Cup. And so we've been very involved in community work from the early ages. I was a member of Crisis Care-Line, the chairperson of Crisis Care-Line, a community-based organization. I was a member of the United Democratic Front, also a spokesperson for the Hillbrow Joubert Park Tenants Action Committee under ACTSTOP, the Action Committee to Stop Evictions, many years ago, when of course I had to leave Johannesburg and run away because the special branch were looking for me. I remember the message that went out. We then spoke to my brother to say that whether it was Christmas Day, Boxing Day, or New Year's Day, we will get your brother, and when we do get him, you will never see that outside again. But of course, you know what mothers are. That is why I keep saying that you can have everything in the world, and if you don't have a mother, you've got nothing. If you have nothing in the world, but you've got a mother, you've got everything. And my mother rightfully came to Johannesburg. She knew the police were after me, made me pack my bags and go back to Durban. So that's what stopped my activity there. But we continued with community work and things, and then I joined the Inkatha Freedom Party.
In what year?
And that would have been in about 2009. And of course, I was not pleased with the way things were going. I was the one that stood up for my late leader and president, Zanele Komogwaza Msibi, who was being abused in the Inkatha Freedom Party because she was a woman. She was very powerful and vociferous. She was the mayor for 14 years. And I stood up at the one day and I raised my concerns about the way she was being treated. And of course, we decided that no, enough was enough. There were no conferences were being called because it was very clear that she was going to walk that conference. That's how much of support she had. And then we formed the National Freedom Party. So we formed it together. I gave it its name, the National Freedom Party. And alhamdulillah, when we were 2.5 months away from the first election that we participated in 2011, and we started what really made great strides in having 227 councillors, speakers, mayors, deputy mayors, having won 5 municipalities, having won and governed the Zululand district municipality. And in 19 other municipalities, we were the kingmakers and we were co-governing, and we had a choice between the IFP and the ANC. I led those negotiations on behalf of my leader, and eventually we decided to work with the ANC. Of course, one of the criteria I put in the negotiations with the IFP was very simple. You've made certain allegations of Zanele Magwaza. You need to withdraw those statements. They refused to do that, and so negotiations fell away, and we entered into negotiations with ANC. And we've been governing from 2011 with the ANC. In that period, the IFP, who were governing 37 municipalities, ended up with only 2 municipalities. Then in 2014, tragedy struck, and my former leader had a massive stroke. Of course, as you know, amongst the African culture, they believe it's not medical, they believe it's more witchcraft. But yeah, tragedy struck. She had a massive stroke in my view. She was not available. She remembered that in 2014, we ended up with 6 members in the legislature in KZN.
Okay.
And 6 members of the National Parliament.
I think in National, you were the 5th largest party.
Absolutely, 5th largest party in the country.
In 2014,
we had it all going for us. And then in 2016, you know, we were sabotaged. The treasurer then, Mr. Ndlovu, deliberately did not pay our registration fee, despite the fact that the night before I called him from Cape Town, and he gave me the assurance everything was paid and done. Now there are allegations that he was paid 7 million. We haven't managed to find him to be able to interrogate and do this and deal with it appropriately. But since the day he did not pay that registration fee, he disappeared. We've never found him. That resulted in the NFP losing all those municipalities. All 227 of the councillors, speakers, mayors ended up without their positions. Officials lost their jobs. It had a major impact on the party, and that's when the downhill of the NFP started, infighting started, factions emerged, and it continues up to today. Now, the death of the president, in fact, before her death, the factions that emerged, everybody wants power and control. I know everything was even done to try and remove me from parliament, but my leader wanted to have nothing of it. She ensured I was number 2 on the list, that I take over her position as the leader in parliament. She had a discussion with me, and we went ahead. Of course, the infighting continued. It gained momentum. factions where they're fighting each other. Then in 2019, there was a possibility that the NFP was not going to contest again because of the infighting. But together with my leader, having convinced her, I managed to bring the two factions together, and we contested in 2019. But I've learned something about black politics. If I don't get what I want, then nobody must get it, even if it means I destroy the organization. That is unfortunately how they conduct themselves. So after the elections in 2019, remember in 2014 we ended up with 6, like I said, parliamentarians, but in 2019 we ended up with 2 seats in the National Assembly and 1 in KZN. Remember, we were re-emerging now after what has happened in 2016. But immediately after the elections, factions started conducting themselves in an unsatisfactory manner. They attempted to remove those that were lawfully elected, like the leader in the KZN legislature. They attempted to even remove me. I had the protection of my president. Matters went to court. Then they wanted to have a conference. I've had them enter into a settlement agreement so that we could go forward. And we put in what we call an interim national executive committee and made that an order of the court. But despite that, they wanted to have conferences in 2019. And my leader and I think the same. We did not want division. We did not want factions. She gave me instructions on the 9th of December 2019 to go to court to stop both factions from going. But the conference was the next day. And the court said, you came at the 11th hour, you can allow it to go on. If it's irregular, you can stop it. Eventually, we did stop it. The court set aside that. 1.5 years later, after setting aside that conference, that faction decided to now go and appeal, and the matter is in the Bloemfontein Appeal Court.
As we speak today.
As I speak to you. Then the problems, the INEC continued to function, but remember, INEC was made up of people from both factions.
What is INEC?
Interim National Executive Committee,
Okay.
which was made an order of the court.
Okay.
Because we've never had any conferences, we could not because there were factions and whatever. My president appointed me as the national PLC member and contact person at the IEC. So in other words, that everything to do with IEC should come via me. It's an order of the court. But factions, when they fight, they say and do anything and everything. They attack you unprofessionally, unsatisfactorily. And when these fighting continued, everybody's been, and when you're not getting it your way, and I said to my people, what we need is a free, fair, credible, and transparent conference. Doesn't matter who wins, allow them to take the party forward. I even went on to say to them that, don't worry about me. There is no place for me in the NFP because of the racism and the attitude and things. And I can't continue belonging to an organization where there's so much of infighting when we have our agenda, our interest should be serving the interests of the people. But the manner in which you conduct yourself is not acting in the best interest of the people on the ground. But be that as it may, we tried to stop it, they didn't listen, the court had stopped it, set aside it, the infighting continued. While it continued, in the INEC, cracks emerged when people realized that the faction that I actually belong to, which is my president's faction, even though I chose to be neutral, they wanted power at any cost. They were undermining everybody, including me. But I was not going to have anything of it. I was going to do only what was right, which my president appreciated. So eventually, the other faction, B, decided that now they can't break me. So they decided now to go and have an unlawful conference, even though we agreed. Sent out circulars after passing resolutions. I put in one of the best systems you could find so nobody could manipulate it. And everybody will get an equal opportunity. There's a database of who are registered members, when they took membership, when it expires, which branch you belong to, everything. And they realize it's not going to work for them. So they came to me, faction B, and they say to me, Munzoor, if you want to be a leader of the party, we can make you the leader. We'll even put up bogus branches. Can you imagine? And I said to them, what? It's never going to happen. I said, don't worry about me. You do the right thing. I want this to be a credible and transparent conference.
So
Whoever
what's your,
wins.
this is still in 2019?
This is, no, this is now 2021, 2022.
Okay, because I'm trying to get us up to speed.
Yeah, we've done with 2019. Yeah,
So-
we're now 2021. Now, so what they did is they were not getting it. Then they come to me and say, but let us be honest that we, that is faction B now, we said, they say they don't have the numbers on the ground. So what did they do eventually? They decided to create, now they went forcefully and removed some councillors. They were being influenced and infiltrated by opposition political parties. Money was the order of the day. Bags of cash has been changing hands. Can you imagine a member of parliament with me from the NFP phoning a councillor of the NFP and telling that councillor, please, I don't want you to vote to the NFP, I want you to vote to the IFP. I'll give you 40,000 rand and a brand new car. I'm already IFP, I'm just biding my time till 2024 and just to get my salary and that's it. And when the councillor refused to do that, they attempted to kill the councillor. When they failed, they went then 2 days later and killed another councillor of ours, 75-year-old councillor, 1 o'clock in the morning. After killing that councillor, they went to kill another councillor, they failed. That is why Minister Kele says that the killing of your councillors emanates from the internal squabbles. Then they went to kill another councillor because they needed to get rid of 2 of them to get power because we took over the Nongoma municipality. And we had everything to take over the Zululand up to today, but they bought 1 councillor who was not willing to support our own party.
I want to get into the nitty-gritties of this down the line. Yeah. So tell me, let us get up to date to 2024. You are parliamentary leader.
Yes.
And what does the party look like at the moment? I mean, we're at the doorstep of elections. Is the party going to contest?
Well, what has happened is they went ahead and had an unlawful conference with 95% of the party not participating, created their own membership books, okay, created their own divisive INEC and carried on despite all the correspondence, everything, they don't care. But anyway, right now as we stand, there's a matter before the court on that leave to appeal in the Bloemfontein High Court. Those that went to the conference, that little group, amongst them broke away. The main manipulator of the conference went there now and says it's irregular, hasn't taken place properly. There were a lot of irregularities. He's now gone to court to set aside it. The rest of them, including the presiding officer who declared that the conference was unlawful and irregular, he's also gone to court to set aside. So right now as I speak to you, 3 days away from the deadline, there is 3 different matters before the court, including an application for liquidation.
Okay. So as we speak, you are on the verge of actually starting a new party.
Yes. Let me tell you about that. Many people in the party, I've been very realistic to them, with what is going on in the party and the lack of leadership and the selfishness, NFP is going to be a repeat of what happened in 2016 when you didn't contest. Plan B you must have. To such an extent that many members of the NFP, over 1,300 of them signed, gave me their signatures to go and have Plan B ready. So I've initiated Plan B, and Plan B is ready if the NFP had not been able to contest. It is now clear what the matters before the court, with the deadline looming 2 days or 3 days away, and the new party, which is the Allied Movement for Change, AM4C, is the alternative. And over and above that, I've been getting many calls from media houses, civil society organizations, the public, calling for me to return to Parliament because there's been unfinished business.
Return to Parliament in 2024.
Return to Parliament in 2024 because there's been unfinished business. And the only option we've had is an alternative party because the NFP is not going to contest. And of course, the people in the public domain have been seeing that the only positive thing of the NFP has been coming from the national parliament. Everything else, whether local, province, is everything that hits the media is negative, negative, negative. So, my question is very simple, madam. If you can't govern your own affairs and can't come on at a negotiating table and find common ground, how are you expected to govern a municipality or a provincial government or a national government? You can't.
So let us take one step back. It's just a lot of political hopping for you. The IFP, NFP, and many might look and say, well, like, you were part of the NFP and you have a lot of criticism of the NFP and you have a lot of criticism of the IFP, and now you're starting something new. You could come across as a disgruntled member, because this is your perception of it.
Well, let me tell you, I think if people follow the media, the public domain, it is quite clear that the NFP has been in the mainstream media, particularly for all the wrong reasons. The infighting, the liquidation, the running to court. I mean, NFP has even made some legal eagles millionaires. That's the fact of the matter. But the point is this, remember, somebody needs to protect and also save the legacy of my former leader. She was a good leader, very dedicated, very humble, very committed, and a selfless leader. What happens to the majority of the members of the NFP? Where do they go to? They were very loyal to the NFP and they continue to be loyal to the NFP. Unfortunately, they are voiceless because of the lack of leadership skills in the NFP and the infighting. Now, if we couldn't sort the problem out for 6 years, how would we sort it out in a week or two? So the reason why there are two reasons why I've created the AM4C. One, there was no hope of saving the NFP whatsoever. And number two, and it's not just the NFP, I've been very vociferous about corruption, about looting, about making sure we have the necessary skills. And when I condemn the conduct and actions of political parties, even in parliament, I included my own party. Because if there's weaknesses there, I have to raise those weaknesses. I can't just point a finger at others when we also have weaknesses in us. And I've attempted to try and get them to educate themselves about what politics is really about. It's about the people on the ground. So the purpose of having AM4C is, one is there's a lot of unfinished business. I could have been selfish and said, listen, I could go and retire. Why do I need to break my head over a whole lot of that's going on? No, that was one. But then I said to myself, hold on, there's so much more to do. We need to identify leadership in the country that can play a pivotal role in the success of this country, because if our people, and I was just speaking to one of our leaders, that we need to create a school of governance and identify, particularly amongst the Ummah, those younger generation that have the leadership skills, the capacity, the integrity, so that we can skill them and prepare them for succession.
Is it a brand new party, or is it a party that's existing already?
All right. Initially, we were going to register a new party, and like I said, signatures had come from my colleagues in the NFP, many of them, and even up to now. The former deputy president of the NFP has just joined the AM4C. She's going to be my premier candidate in the KwaZulu-Natal. And she's been the former deputy president and president of the women's movement in the NFP. And there are many others. So it's not a new party. Remember, this party is in existence. It's been there from 2013. We have a ward councillor from Mdoni municipality. The former leader of the NFP, who's now the acting chairperson of the AM4C, is the Roy Bulla. He has a large percentage of particularly the Muslim support in the South Coast, Chatsworth and Phoenix areas and things, in the Indian community at large. And he contacted me and he said to me, with everything that's going on in that NFP, I have been following you for so long. I want to have a discussion with you. And I went to meet him. And in the discussion, he said, the way you present yourself, it's very similar to the way I conducted myself. I want to, step down. My children are abroad, and I needed somebody to take over this party. I want to hand it over so the legacy will live on. And he said to Munzoor Bhai, I want to hand this party over to you, the best candidate to be able to do this. And after giving it, interrogating it and thinking over it and speaking to others, I felt it's possibly the best thing to do. And that's when he's handed
So
over.
are you technically repurposing an existing political party?
Yes, you remember that the AM4C has been in existence from 23 at a local level, have never contested at provincial and national level. And like I said, Roy Bola is a elected ward councillor, not a PR councillor, got quite a great following. In fact, he's been to a large extent giving a lot of his support to Al Jamaa in the past, in the national and provincial level. And so all we are doing is, yes, you are absolutely repurposing to contest at the provincial and national level so that we can play a pivotal role in the national politics of this country, particularly at provincial level and national level, because that is where the decisions are made.
Some of the language you use, the words you use, gives an indication or a flavor that it's a Muslim party. Is it a Muslim party, not a Muslim party?
Now, let me tell you, AM4C is not a Muslim party. AM4C is a party that caters for everyone, irrespective of their race, religion, gender, etc. However, the AM4C is based on entirely, and I want to repeat, entirely on Islamic ethos and principles and values. The purpose of AM4C is to embrace people to come and look at the way we will do things differently and how we can achieve success on Islamic ethos and principles.
But you're coming a month and a half, 2 months before elections. We have numerous Islamic parties with different experiences. With the African Muslim Party, and I think there was the Muslim Party in the first government. We have Al Jamaa. We have Muslim representation in, I think, almost all the big political parties. First of all, we have a lot of catching up to do. So first, you have a lot of catching up to do. And what is it exactly tangibly that you would like?
Well, there are two things to that. First of all, on the contrary, every ulama body that I have gone to meet with leaders in the community, not a single one of them were in agreement that we needed a Muslim party. Strange enough.
Can you mention some of the parties you went to? The Muslim organizations you've met with?
We've been to the Sunni Jamiat al-Ulama of South Africa. We've been to the Jamiat Ulama in KZN. We went to Mufti Zubair Bayat and his team. We went to the MJC. They believe that it is what we need.
Did you go there and tell them or inform them we are thinking of creating a new party? What is your idea? Were you that clear with them?
We have been to them. We've introduced them. We told them what AM4C is all about, and they were in agreement that we need a party with Islamic ethos and principles. However, what we don't need is a Muslim party, because then you'll be alienating a large percentage of the people. Now, let me elaborate on that. When you tell, right now, Islam appears to be a threat to the people in the world.
Okay. Before we get there, and I wanted to focus on that, what are the other constituents in the party at the moment?
All right, let me tell you first.
Because my question is, if it's a party for everyone, did you then consult people from other religions to say we are starting this party? And why is it then Islamic ethos? What about, especially coming from Durban, a lot of Christians, a lot of Hindus and so forth, a lot of African traditional beliefs there. So if you're a party for everyone, why, first of all, how do the constituents and the other members of the organization feel about this position? Just take me to those mechanics.
All right, well, let me say this. Islamic ethos and principles, because we believe that is the perfect way of life.
Who's we?
We, all of us that are part of AM4C. And fortunately, that, like I said, some of the Muslim organizations we have went and met are of the same opinion as we are. So we've had that buy-in. But very importantly, my contribution as a member of parliament and in the political domain over the last 15, 20 years, particularly the last 10 years in parliament, and some of the things that we've achieved in parliament, despite me coming from a predominantly black party, from a so-called Christian party, I was able to achieve so much in the Parliament of South Africa, clearly indicated that there was a need. Now let me elaborate on that. First of all, if you talk of a Muslim party perspective, we've only got one party with only one seat, or after 16 years. That sends a message out there. But very importantly, the AM4C has Muslim representation, it has Christian representation, it has the Koyan San, the first indigenous nation, it has black representation, it has colored representation. So we have Hindu representation.
You mean as people who will be nominated on the list?
Yeah, yes. I'll give you a good example.
Could you share some of the names?
Yes, indeed. I can give you, I'm not sure if everybody is happy for me to do that, but I can give you one, but I'll give you a few.
This will be broadcasted in the next week and a half or two. So
right, okay. But anyway, Brother Rafiq Hassan, well-known name in South Africa, is a member of the AM4C. In fact, he's the acting Secretary General of the AM4C. And Nazir Malik, household name, people know him. Roy Bulla is, you know him. Mashinini Mapumulu, former Deputy President of the AM4C. Pamela Ngubane, the lady who is the Zionist, who is supporting Palestine. Inati, the one that walked from Soweto to Durban, is part of the AM4C. We've got a pastor, Glenn Ndubele, who's part and parcel of. Pastor Victor Louis from Cape Town. Dr. Greg Fick, the leader of the first indigenous nation of South Africa. Malcolm Taylor, the leader of Forum for Change, many Koyan San communities in the Western Cape. Chief Tanya Kleinans, amongst many others. So we have a whole list of people. Oh, by the way, let me give you the latest name, and I think you might be interested in this one. From Gauteng. Brother Inayat Wadi is a member.
Inayat Wadi?
Yes, AM4C as well.
Okay. Inayat Wadi, the presenter on Asana
Media.
Yes,
Mashallah. He's also part of the AM4C. And he's the premier candidate for the AM4C in Gauteng. Faisal Sayed, well known in the media circles. You know Faisal Sayed from Western Cape in the Cape Town, has his own studio, media houses. He is going to be the premier candidate for the Western Cape.
These people won't be surprised that they find their names in this discussion.
Absolutely not. Every one of them have got
I'm not going to get phone calls and say, this guy mentioned my name.
Every one of them have got membership of the AM4C.
I'm joking. I'm not doubting the integrity.
Every one of them have got membership.
I mean, the question I'm saying is that, I'm alluding rather, the serious question is, a lot of this is happening very fast, very soon, very close to elections.
You want me to comment on that?
Yes.
The NFP were 2.5 months old when they contested their first election. And if you go to the history of new political parties, those that come up 2.5, 3 months before the election come with a bang.
What's your target? What's your bang?
But let me also say this.
No. What's your target? What is your bang?
Okay. We are expecting, okay, give me two aspects to this. Your support base and what you're expecting is also depends on the availability of resources. And unfortunately in politics is about what you give and what you get. And we, based on Islamic ethos, have made it very clear. We don't want anything from anybody that's expecting anything in return. I have met people, and I won't go down that line now, who were willing to support, but they're all about what they want to expect. And I said, no, if we're going to compromise your ethos now, then that's it, and we're not going to go that route. There's no point in me standing in parliament and complaining about corruption and being part and parcel of it, but that's the one. So I can tell you we will be happy, inshallah, if we can get 8 seats in parliament.
Wow, that's a big.
Now let me explain this.
What's the numbers? That's
8 seats. 300,000. 300, just over 300, 320, 300.
Because I think in the last election you needed about 40,000, around 42, around there for the seat.
Yeah. Now,
so you're confident you can get at least 300,000?
Now let me tell you, in the work that I have done in Parliament and my contribution, if you look at the law enforcement in South Africa, the police force particularly, you speak to 7 out of 10 of them. There is only one person in the entire 400 members in Parliament that defends and protects and stands up for the police officers in this country. So wherever you go, you'll hear them raising this. If you talk about the first indigenous nation, it's the only person that fights for the first, it was me. If you talk about Palestine, I was the first person in the world that brought a motion to downgrade the South African embassy in Israel. Remember that this motion was passed in 2017 by the ANC. And every 3 months, I put in a motion, it expired every 3 months. I had to put it in again. I raised it to the president, all the ministers. Why not, why not? So until it was my turn through the rotational system and they couldn't beat me, and he did it. If you look at the Palestinians coming to South Africa visa free, it is through my contribution. 30 years they were not able to do that, while Israelis were coming to South Africa free with no restriction.
What did you do?
Palestinians can now come to South Africa
what
without...
did you do? What did you
I
do in facilitating that?
was persistent with the Minister of Home Affairs, who I enjoy a good relationship with, the Minister of International Relations, with the Minister of Police, with the Minister of Intelligence, because they've raised all kinds of things that Palestinians were a security risk. The pressure was there every week, question session to them, oral, written. Not only that, let's talk about the issue currently that I'm dealing with, on the issue of headscarves in the health sector. We've got correspondence from the minister. He wants a delegation for us to discuss it. I'm waiting for the delegation from the Ummah to go and sit there to fight that. It's looking positive. If you talk about the problems that we were having in OR Tambo Airport, I'm the one that went there. I demanded to see the CEO and look at the video footage, which I did, to see whether they were deliberately marginalizing or victimizing our people, and put pressure on them. Our people are not having those problems anymore. Let's talk about the Russian-Ukraine war. I was the only one in the parliament that stood up and defended the Russian, because I know who the culprits are in this proxy war that's taking place. You know, so when he talks about corruption, if you notice something, in the entire parliament, nobody were able to get the answers of how we took every aircraft of ours, 14 aircraft, SAA, and sold it for 35 million and rented it back for 44 million. And nobody wants to assist me with it. We've got the answers, how it was sold and who sold it. And now I'm asking for, I'm told, you know, the information has been thrown away. So, talk about corruption. I'm the only one, if you've noticed that in parliament, that is attacking every party that's corrupt wherever they are, including the NFP, I say about it. I don't exclude them. If they're wrong, they're wrong. But what am I doing? I'm also asking to put measures in place that can prevent that. We know the solution. Every politician that's in parliament knows it. We will not do it. Do you know why? Because every political party, wherever they govern, are benefiting from this corruption. So you're never going to get rid of corruption anytime soon. I've raised it with the president. I'm raising it with the minister. You know what it is. Now what am I doing today? When we're done, we are going to be putting a motion to ensure that every local government municipality on a monthly basis will put up a report on every tender that was awarded. Which is the company? Who are the directors? What is the value? What is the itemized billing? So the community can actually see who is getting all these. What price? Are you paying 10 rand for a bottle of water that costs 2 rand, or are you paying 100 rand for it? You'll be able to see.
On that note, let's take a break. We are in conversation with Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam. I don't know if I should say previous parliamentary leader of the NFP. And
I'm still the parliamentary leader.
Sorry?
I'm still the parliamentary leader.
So, current parliamentary leader of the NFP and president of the Allied Movement for Change.
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines.
I mean, that's first of all, how do you define Zionist? Who are these Zionists? What type of evidence do you have for these claims? That's the and regime change and you know, yeah. Let me leave it.
All right. If you understand politics, and if you look around the world, look at the price that many countries have paid for opposing the United States of America. I want to reiterate, if you want peace in the world, anywhere in the world, like President Putin also said, and I agree with him, the biggest monster and enemy of peace, humanity, and upholding human rights is the United States of America and its allies. Now, South Africa has taken a stance, particularly on Palestine, that was not expected. And that has created a lot of enemies. You've heard analysts talk about it, you heard presidents and prime ministers all over the country talking about it. If you listen to what the United States have said, that if you have to affect the relationship that they have with any other country by what you have done now with Palestine and Israel, then you're affecting them. If you look at the influx of people from Israel right now into the Western Cape, if you look at the reports and funding, it's been available, that the amount of monies that are being made available. One thing nobody can deny is the human rights violation in Palestine, the attempt by Israel to completely eradicate Palestine from the map. There is no doubt about it. And nobody should be disputing that. Despite our attempts to go to the ICJ and every attempt, and many other countries coming to the support of Palestine, I've always said you'll have limited success, and you can see that. Israel continues. Now, one of the common things between all these political parties that are aligned to Israel, the West and the Zionist state of Israel, is the ones I've just given you: ACDP, Freedom Front, Democratic Alliance, the PA, and Action SA, and others. Okay.
These are big allegations you're making.
No. I'm not making any allegations. What I am saying is a fact. It's been proven. You've seen the funding list that has been made available. Over and above that, we all know that South Africa is very weak in dealing with illicit financial flows in this country. I mean, if you want to deny that, then you must deny that Gaddafi died because of that. You must then deny what is happening in Sudan has got nothing to do with any other country like the West and everybody else. You must deny that the United States of America has nothing to do with what is happening, and others have got nothing to do with what is happening with what is happening.
I think at an international relations level, there are numerous actors around the world, of course, protagonists, the United States leading one camp, Russia leading one camp. And I mean, we are also in international relations reality today, where many countries have interest. So many countries can agree with a country on something and disagree on something, and disagree on a few things and agree on a few things. So I mean, I don't think that again, to establish a cause and effect, or to say, because there is interference in this country, I mean, the removal of Gaddafi had something that had its own long, deep history. What happened in what has happened in Sudan, that has its own history, its own internal dynamics. So to again, just to jump from here to there, that needs a lot of steps that we're jumping. But again, coming back to South Africa, I mean, the question is, at what point do we say there is partial truth in this or total truth in it? And at what point do we say, hey, it's before elections? It's before elections, and in South Africa, we are used to boogeymen. There's the Boers, there's the Boere, there's the whites, there's the Indians, there's the blacks. And in South Africa, we're a country where we're finding scapegoats, especially political scapegoats, as communities. It's very common. So my question again is, do we have enough evidence? Do we have enough when we talk about this issue of Zionism? I mean, again, Zionism is something which is very specific and unique to one's position on Israel. Zionism doesn't have a position on your potholes. Zionism doesn't have a position on what you're doing is on the IFP and so forth. I mean, Zionism is so. I mean, lobby groups exist to convince governments, to convince, etc. And I'm sure people will lobby your government, your political party, just like you went and you lobbied with ulama and said, this is what we're trying to do, etc. Ulama said, we'll support you, etc. So lobbying, whether it be Zionist, communist, I mean, many can say, and as a South African, I can say, okay, we have Zionists who are supporting these political parties, but don't you have communists from China and Russia who are supporting other parties in this country? And don't you have conservatives who are supporting other parties in this country? And do political parties not have the right to say, I'm a communist, I have Islamic ethos, I have Zionist ethos? Does our democracy not allow us that, irrespective of whether I agree with Zionism? And I can say, well, communism. We have Uyghur Muslims in China, Russia's history in Afghanistan, Russia's history in Central Asia, etc. So I'm just saying, these are different ideologies. At what point do we say, or how do we get to the level of saying that this ideology is trying to take over the government when we already have a government that's a tripartite alliance, communism, socialism. The AFF is communist, socialist. That's an ideology.
Okay, first of all, I'm not sure what your interpretation of democracy is. My understanding and interpretation of democracy is something that has been imposed on us by the West so that it can cause more mayhem, division, destruction, and chaos in people's lives.
I think that's our current democracy that you have.
That is what my understanding and interpretation of democracy. We talk about democracy out of convenience when it suits us. Democracy is okay.
And what's your opinion on constitution? Because if we talk about democracy, then we would then go and say, if we talk about democracy in South Africa, the framework for our democracy is our constitution as it was done at CODESA and so forth with the numerous parts in it. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, when I talk about democracy, I think the question I'm asking, we decided in South Africa to enter into negotiation on the so-called democratic principles or ideology that was introduced to us or basically by the West. And I think the question we need to ask is, 30 years later, is it working for South Africa? Whose democratic rights we are talking about? If you talk about democracy, if you talk in Palestine, whose democracy and democratic rights are we talking about? Now, I think we must not forget, first of all, yes, there are different ideologies in the world. But depending to what extent that ideology of the different communities affects humanity. The ideology of Zionists certainly has a negative impact on anybody that's not Zionist. It doesn't have an impact on a person who might be socialist or might not be socialist. But I'll give you a good example. Every Zionist is a Jew, but not every Jew is a Zionist. Amongst the Jews, and it's loud and clear that even their own Jews that are not subscribing to the principles of Zionism are undermined. They believe they're not the chosen ones. They isolate them. They alienate them. They victimize them. They do everything. That's it. And that is why you find so many Jewish people in different parts of the world rising and standing up with Palestine in support of Palestine and condemning Zionism. That's what they do, first of all. I see you repeating the issue of, on the issue of funding from them. I'm not sure how much more do you need to see to be able I'm not sure if you see in the political party funding, who is funding these people. Then the question you should be asking is, why are these people only funding a certain group of people with a certain ideology who had lost their consistency and their independence? If you followed Parliament and all the debates and everything that has happened as far as Palestine, particularly for now, okay, that the people that cannot see the human rights violation, forget about everything else, cannot see exactly what is happening to the Palestinian people, that will stand there and still defend the massacre of the Palestinians by saying, no, it's not Israel at fault. And every instance and every evidence that they provided thus far, that the media, the propagandists that have provided, has been proven to be false now. So what is very clear, there is this ideology of Zionism. To a very large extent, they also control the US in any event. The entire US government is basically run by these kind of people. And South Africa, remember, it's the Israel state that colluded with the apartheid government in South Africa pre-1994. It is through the state of Israel that lots of our minerals and wealth was taken away during the days of apartheid. Unfortunately for us, the stronghold and relationship that they've had with the apartheid government, the current government was so busy with everything else, didn't see through this and allowed them to infiltrate South Africa to the extent that every sector in South Africa is captured by these people from Israel. Which simply means, and let me tell you, they regard South Africa as another home. And that is why in my presentation at Parliament, I said, if we don't do something about this now, then the city of Cape Town will become another Palestine. But where did I get that from? It's the research that I have done over the period of time, over what has happened. Don't run away from the fact that Gaddafi did not sing the song that they want. Let's look at what has happened in Iraq. Let's look at what has happened in Syria all over. You can see look at it in Africa as well. And that is why even the African continent is not comfortable or afraid of wanting to defend what is happening in Palestine or come open because of the risks that, I'm surprised if you may not have seen and heard the number of threats that have already been made to South Africa. Already, it's said loud and clear, it's there. It's come from different presidents, prime ministers all over the world. Not, of course, forgetting the monster of it all, the United States. Now, we may want to compare this with people like the Russian president and things. Yes, nobody is an angel. I would agree with that.
I wasn't comparing. I was saying that there are different ideologies that exist across any political spectrum.
But the difference is their ideology currently. Their ideology and the statements that is being made made by the President Putin of Russia is, if he's will stand to that, he says, we want a world where nobody will dominate each other. He says we want a world where we can ensure there'll be social upliftment for everybody. He says we want a world that nobody will manipulate anything, like you have the World Health Organization and the IMF and everything that they do. Now, despite his communist ideology that he has, what is he saying? He's saying things that will want to create a better world for everybody to live in. On the other hand, what is the West saying? If you saw the latest presentation that they make, their dependence and their success depends on poverty in Africa, the disease in Africa, the chaos in Africa, the regime change in Africa. In other words, there has to be chaos. If you look at what has happened in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, there's only two sectors that have thrived all over the world. One is the United States economic growth in the armament industry increased 7-fold because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. And we know what that war is all about. I can tell you if you want to know, that's a proxy war. Russia is a threat to them, and I'm glad they are a threat to them because we need somebody to be able to say, no, you can't walk over everybody. But that's the first thing, the first is armor, which is the second industry. Created more billionaires that my latest report says that you'll now be creating the first trillion in the world. Where did they come from? The pharmaceutical industry. Where do they all emanate from? All from the West. What is it about? It means that then let's not forget the depopulation agenda that they have. I've gone even deeper to even interrogate where did HIV and AIDS come? Where did COVID come from? Why were we not able to take certain things that worked? I sit here before you because I believe ivermectin saved me. I took it every 2 weeks. There's proof. Somebody gave you evidence. Every single patient he treated, not one died, never went to hospital, not one went to hospital, not one took oxygen. What does it clearly tell you? There is an agenda for control. And until if you want to make the world a more peaceful place, first of all, we have to recognize that there are countries whose survival depends on the mayhem and poverty and everything that exists elsewhere. So based on that, nobody ever thought that South Africa would take on the Zionist state of Israel. No, they didn't. In fact, the first one was that downgrading. They never thought it was going to happen. It happened. Whether we did the right thing with this one, whether we thought we were going to achieve more, I was one of them that didn't think we were going to achieve much because for me, these are all puppet organizations. They are toothless bodies. You talk about UN, the Security Council, you talk about all these international institutions. You can achieve nothing from them. However, we made our mark as far as our legal team did a fantastic piece of work. So we made our mark. The latest motion, they're not going to achieve it, they're not going to do it. Why? Not because you don't want to do it, you can't do it. Why can't you do it? Israel has infiltrated South Africa to such an extent. Right now, you can bring the economy to a standstill. That's the reason. That is why I posed the question to the minister last week. Why did you even consider this motion if you know that you're not going to be able to achieve it? Because in your own words, you said recently that it's going to be, it's not practical. She said, well, I'm not sure if I use the word practical, but technically that's what she says. The country is infiltrated in every sector. You can bring the country to a standstill. And then you'll have those who have power all over who will be jumping down the throats of South Africa. Yeah. So that's where we are.
Yeah. Zakir, thanks for giving us this clarity, and I allowed you the space to, because I mean yourself and many other politicians, but you've been probably the most vocal on this issue, and it was important for our listeners to understand from you your perspective and the depth of your engagement on this issue. We are in conversation with Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines.
In conversation with Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam.
Right.
You mentioned the number of 350,000 around there. That is the amount of votes you are targeting in the AM4C. Can you explain to us how you read that's? I mean, that is a big number, is it not, for a first-time party? Do you agree on that it's a relatively big number?
Well, let me say this, that when the NFP were born, which I was one of the originators and founding members of the party, we had 227,000 councillors, speakers and things. So it's not a large number. And now we've made national footprint. In fact, to some extent, international footprint. And I think in the time that I have served in Parliament and the contribution that I've made, I'm expecting a lot of support because I've been getting calls, and that's made me take this decision to form the AM4C. There has been a call from the public all over the country, different parts of the country.
Do you think, is it mostly Muslim targeted? What do you see? Where are you canvassing? Are you canvassing mostly between Muslims, amongst
well, let me start off.
Indigenous
Like
black
I
areas?
said initially, we are a party that serves everybody. Now, I think South Africans need to know and understand, and it's time that we must vote, recognize people with leaders inside those parties rather than looking at political parties. Unless we change our mindset and identify parties with leaders that have got the character, the integrity, and the passion to serve them, you're not going to achieve a different South Africa, I can tell you, because we all are moving in the same direction. Now, I have been dealing with many of the constituencies, the Khoi and San community, the Muslim community to a very large extent, the police community, the NFP community.
Is this going to be a one-man party?
Certainly not. I'll give you a good example. If you take my deputy president that came from the NFP, Mashinini Mapumulo, she's got a large following in the NFP. If you take Dr. Fick, very large following amongst the Khoi and San community. Chief Tanya Clenans, large community among the Khoi and San. If you take Rafiq Hassan, is not only concentrates on the Muslim community. Comparative religion deals with all the different communities. If you look at the various pastors and religious leaders and bishops that we've got in the party, they're going to bring the Christian community. If you look at Roy Bulla, is going to bring a lot of the Indian community, the Muslim community, the Hindu community, and many other communities. So it's not just based on me, my contribution. Roy Bulla has made massive contribution in local government from the time he's been there. And when he was in the national government, he made exceptional contribution. But let's look at the kind of leaders that we have got. These are leaders that have followings. These are leaders who know what's going on and understand what's going on. But very importantly, they've got the ethics and the values, and that is what you need to inculcate into public representatives.
What's your first school of business if you get into Parliament, if you make it?
Well, let me, depending on exactly how we perform and how many seats we get, whether there's going to be a coalition or whatever it is. But I think, and like I've done just before this, when I've had a chat with the deputy president, on what are some of the challenges that are facing the country. And I think we'll need to then talk about the short term, medium term, and long term. I can give you an example of a short term that you can do overnight. I'll give you a good example. South Africa has a very high population of homeless people. Okay? South Africa continues talking about restitution of land. Every day you hear it. We want to go and even amend Section 25, which was not necessary. Now, if I give you a good example, Port Durban has got over 450,000, City of Cape Town 570 on the waiting list for houses. Now, what stops us from every municipality, whoever is governing, to identify the people that live in your municipality, in your local authority, who do not have a home? What stops you from identifying them, create a database of them, the land that is available in that municipality?
Municipal owned land.
Municipal owned land. And if you don't have enough, you can acquire it from the private sector, okay? And subdivide it immediately and give every South African family, including a single parent family, a piece of, don't worry about the water, sanitation, and electricity for now. Give them the land and give them the piece of paper, give them their dignity back to address the inequalities our people face today, one of the most unequal societies. When people meet you on the street today, they don't even ask you what's your name. First thing, where do you live? Where you come from? But if you give them, you're giving them their dignity, then you tell them, based on the budget allocations, most of which come from national government. This year, I'll give 1,000 sites electricity, water, and sanitation. Next year, another 1,000. People are not unreasonable. They'll be happy with that. Now, what do you need to do that? Very little or nothing. All you need to do is identify your people, which if a municipality, a local authority, does not have a database of the people living in the area.
Aren't these databases managed by Department of Human Settlements and so
Yes.
forth?
Yes. Now, remember, I am the one that's been pushing this for a long time. I even went on to say, create a estate bank. And I was asked, the DA, others had a discussion with me, explain. I told them, who lends money to the Reserve Bank? Government. Who owns the Reserve Bank? Private businesses. Now, what stops you if you're lending at a nominal rental, and that time the nominal prime rate was 3%. I said, what stops you, as much as I'm not in support of interest, of giving these people the land, right? Your job is to provide them with the land. You give them a 3% interest rate. Even a pensioner will be able to, will spend 100,000 to put up a roof, a decent home than the one room you're giving them. What stops you from doing that? You can do it right now. Number two, minerals, the wealth of this country. We say the wealth of this country belongs to the people of this country. I told the minister, and I raised the question, when are you going to make sure that the wealth of this country belongs, like you say, belongs to the people, is going to benefit the people? So when are you going to make sure that at least the 50% to the private sector who's going to mine and 50% to the people on the ground so they can benefit, like Masisi is now doing in Botswana? He's told De Beers. What did he say to De Beers? No. If it's not a win-win situation anymore, I've got some German investors, I'm going to go that route. The wealth of this country, which is supposed to belong to the people, is in the control of somebody else. What stops us from doing that? Nothing. We need to slowly...
Are these some of the big immediate term issues you want to
I can tell you, corruption is so big in South Africa, but two things I said to the Deputy President. One, I said, I will work with you in a coalition government if you give me two things.
With the ANC?
Deputy President, yes.
So you are prepared?
I said, if you give me two things. One, no politician will ever have anything to do with employment or appointment of any office bearers in the whole country. That must be done by an independent body of experts from private sector who will appoint the people best able to do the job fit for purpose. And secondly, no politician must have anything to do with procurement, tenders, supply, nothing. If you keep this out, even your coalition government, I said to him, will work perfectly. Because the focus of coalition government is not about what you want to do. If it was, which one is working? Not one. The focus is on the bags of cash that each and every one of them are getting. And he agreed with me.
You spoke about coalitions. Do you think there will be a need for coalitions in?
Absolutely, I believe.
I mean, let's look at just some rudimentary numbers. The ANC is at the moment 57%. DA is at 20%. That takes you to 77%. The EFF, I think they're at 10%.
10, yeah.
10%. That takes you to 87. That means everyone else is at the moment are sitting in a 13 point something percent, the smaller parties. If we say, for argument's sake, that the EFF, DA, and ANC, each of them reduces by 10%, that still brings you down to 77%. If the ANC loses 10%, they're still above 50%. For the ANC to get into a red zone, be under 50%, they need to lose at least 15% to get. So I mean, do you believe that at least the ANC would lose at least 15% of the vote?
Okay, let me start off by saying, first of all, there is no clear stats on how MK will impact on the ANC, other than if you go on the recent performance, it is clear that a sizable number.
In KZN?
Yeah, not only in KZN.
I mean, KZN and the areas we've got in Mpumalanga up the road from Gauteng, yeah? And those are Zuma ethnic strongholds and political strongholds, right?
Okay, let me give you a good example. If you talk about, in fact, the right time to have this discussion will be a week from today. There are lots and lots of comments that are being made out in the political domain about who is joining MK and who's going there, who's leaving the ANC and things. And only then will you know and understand what impact it's going to make on the ANC and how it's going to dent them. That's the first thing. However, all indications are, there is no doubt about it, that if you got, say, 20 million people that are going to vote in this election, and if, for that matter, the MK takes a sizable number away from the ANC.
What's your prediction? The MK will, I mean, if your prediction for your party is 350,000, what do you think the MK will get?
You know, from what I am gathering, and I attended an event on Friday night, and I also picked up there that indications appear that the ANC may just come to about 42%. That's what the indication, that they may come up to about 42%. And then they're going to need coalition governments. There's also indication that they might end up working with the DA if they don't get a majority.
What is your prediction for the MK?
Personally, the MK's, most of its votes will come from KZN. They will get some numbers from Mpumalanga. They will get from Gauteng, but it also depends on whether there are other role players that's got their parties, like Ace Magashule and many others. And we'll only know that after the close of whether they are joining forces or whether they are going independently.
High road, highest expectation, if you choose the highest number that you think the MK might get?
Personally, for me, I think the ANC will need the MK to form a coalition.
That means if you are saying the ANC gets 42, you think the MK could get 10% of the vote?
It could get 10% of the vote, and I think that the MK will need to work with the ANC. However, there's a level of fear, because the MK is also talking about wanting to work with the
EFF. That was
now, given the history of politics and the conduct of leaders, the various charges, allegations, corruption and mismanagement and everything, and the impact of money, do we really have the assurance and the guarantee that some of these people who we believe that will not totally destroy the ANC, will that be a reality or not? We don't know. My experience of politics in KwaZulu-Natal tells me what I said earlier in our conversation. Even if it means we destroy a whole organization if we don't get what we want, so be it, we must destroy it. And that is what my greatest fear is.
In that vein, what is your assessment of, I want to say safety of minorities, but I'm trying to use it neutral. What is your assessment of the future and the future of minorities in South Africa? Muslims, Indians, coloreds, so forth. Because it seems, that they are always a subject of a very different type of campaigning. The Western Cape, of course, has its own dynamics there. I say this because in South Africa, the issue of race is still very, very commonly used within political parties, to gain support and so forth, as part of the political program. So sometimes it's difficult to say what is real, what is just campaigning, what is just sloganing, what is... From your opinion, where you sit, what do you see? How do you assess the safety, the well-being, the welfare of minorities in South Africa?
Well, first of all, I must tell you, race plays a very important role in the politics of this country. However, the minorities must remember that they are very significant in South Africa. And unless those minorities understand that and come together and play a more active role in the politics of South Africa.
How are they significant?
Because their contribution is, if you look at certain provinces, if you look at their contribution, if you look at the impact that they have made in certain areas where they govern, in certain roles in society that they play. And I'll take you back to many years. When the Indian community came to South Africa, they lived and worked under the most horrendous conditions. And look at the success that they have made. They worked very hard for it. Just didn't come on a silver platter. So the fact that they could take something that was worth nothing and turn that around. If you look at the first indigenous nation of South Africa, they are the rightful heirs of this land and the wealth of this country, whether we like it or not. Everybody came here after them and found them here. Indian, white, colored, everybody came after them.
Referring to the Khoisan?
According to Khoisan, they were the first indigenous nation that were found here.
Although many political leaders and nationalists will differ with you on that, but that's another conversation.
Well, I can tell you that the evidence is there. If you go into the history, it's loud and clear. The Khoisan, the first, were always here. In fact, when the people came in here, they didn't even know how to identify where to get water, where to do this. Khoisan, they did that. Khoisan were scattered. The only difference is this: they never made an impact. They didn't improve. They lived under traditional conditions, and that is it. But the fact is, they were here. Important thing is this: if these minority communities come together, they can make an impact. If you saw how significant the Muslim vote is, have you ever seen the ANC going knocking from door to door in the last 30 years? Never. But in this election, right now, they are visiting every little organization, meeting every Muslim person that they can visit. They realize for the first time how significant.
How significant is the Muslim vote? Do you have any stats on how many Muslims are in South Africa? I've asked this to every guest here.
Well, let me tell you, the stats is there's about 2 million Muslims, but the sad thing is, the stats is there's only about 800,000 Muslims in South Africa that are eligible to vote, right? And
so voter eligibility is the key number.
Then you have to look at the question of how many of them are registered to vote, and that brings it down to, I'm told, about 500 some odd thousand.
And then how many of them actually?
But that depends how accurate the statistics is, because we know we have a problem, and this is, they are relying on statistics of 2011 or 2015, I'm told, or whatever it is. However, if 500 Muslims voted in South Africa,
500,000.
The 500,000 Muslims voted in South Africa. What does it simply tell you? You got 10 seats in the National Assembly.
Do you think that is a bankable strategy in the long term?
Can I tell you? Why can't you make your voice heard so that you can protect your own interest, protect your religious freedom and things in the country? You understand? Play a pivotal role.
Muslims seem extremely
Complacent.
comfortable. Comfortable.
in a comfort zone.
No. Comfortable in the ANC. Many Muslims are very comfortable in the DA. I mean, and these are the two big political parties in South Africa, and they found through the years value. You were comfortable in the IFP, and you found value in the IFP.
Well, let me tell you.
So I don't believe, and I'm sure you don't believe, that Muslims are monolithic in the way in which they express themselves and who they are in South Africa. So what type of expression of politics and what type of expression of Islam or type of ideology do you think is needed to attract a significant or majority of that 500,000 Muslims?
I think, first of all, there is no doubt that all people from all race groups, religious groups, played a pivotal role in the freedom that we enjoy today. How much freedom we enjoy, that's another question for another day. But I think what is important, that the 500,000 Muslims that have registered to vote must understand one thing. Islam is a threat worldwide. If you want what is best for you and the generations to come, then you have to participate in the politics of this country. Whether you are 500,000 or whether you are 5 million, it's an obligation to participate in the politics of South Africa in order to protect the generations to come. The problem we got with many of us is we are in a comfort zone. We think we're okay, we have our houses, we got our cars, we got businesses, we got this. That can only exist for a period of time. You have to worry about what's going to happen in 10 and 20 years' time. Many of our people are leaving the country. That is creating a dysfunctional society, but how many more can leave? What is going to happen to all those that can't? So I am saying that at the same time, if you go there continuously just supporting the ANC despite all their weaknesses, if they're not willing to listen and say, let us work together, it's not you and me, it must be together, us. Then the question is, why do you need to support them? Because if they're going to fail, you're going to fail with them. But if you go there and play a positive role, like having an alternative, even if it means you will end up working with them in a coalition, but ensure they follow the straight path and give them direction and do the right thing. But not go there and sell your seat, because parties are now what they're doing, smaller parties are going there. You're getting 1 or 2 seats and you lose your objectivity, your independence, and you just go and sing the praises of everything. It should not work like that. You must make your contribution. You must always ensure that you've got a mandate from the people, so you must be accountable to the people, and you must go back and take a mandate where you take this decision, even when you go into coalition with the people. But what is important, you can't lose your independence. You must work with the ANC if the ANC is willing to listen. I give you a good example. When I raised this with the deputy president, this is what I want. He agreed. He says, let's put it down in the documents, which they did. And I can tell you it's not going to be negotiable.
You did this on behalf of the AM4C?
No, this was done about 6-8 months ago with the NFP.
NFP.
Yeah. So whichever party it is, the point is you cannot afford to lose your independence, because you don't represent yourself, you're representing the public, the people.
What do you think I think we've discussed the opportunities out there for the AM4C. What do you think are the threats? What could threaten, or what are the threats out there for as a new political party? What could hinder your progress? What could...
There are 2 things. One is that the electoral office and larger parties tend to abuse the smaller parties, even in parliament. It took me 2 years, 3 years to fight to get more time for the smaller parties, because in 3 minutes you can't make significant contribution. For SONA, they pushed it to 5 minutes. But importantly, in participating in election, people on the ground don't necessarily want to fund smaller parties because they can't get back what they want. That's the first thing.
How much does it cost to fund a political party? What type of funding is needed? If we had to say per seat provincial, how much is...
Can I tell you, in an election of this nature, if you're contesting every province, smaller parties can get away with about 20 million rand. Some of them, I spoke to one small party the other day in Parliament. They said to me they're looking at trying to get 100 million.
To get how many seats?
How many you're going to get out of it, it just depends. But what people are forgetting, you can put up 20, 30 parties, smaller parties. What you're offering to the people, it's very easy to say, I'm going to do this, do that, and do that. Like all the manifestos are talking at the moment, the ANC says, I'm going to do that. What do they do in the 30 years? Now, if you can do that in the next 5 years, then why didn't you do it in the last 30 years? Sometimes we also think that one party is better than the other when all the attacks are on one party. It's not the case. There's enough corruption in KZN, with the IFP. There's enough corruption. You can see how many of the municipalities, the mayors have been suspended, expelled, and everything. You can see the corruption in the DA. You can look at the state of Naizna municipality now. The problems are all over. There's weaknesses in the system. It's time to go back to the drawing board. There's no accountability because all the parties are doing the same thing. That's the problem. But what is it that you can deliver to the people that is different, that is achievable?
But you can't also deliver without the backing and the support and the votes of the big parties.
Yes, I agree. Until the big parties do not have that overall support and majority, and that is where people make a very big mistake. People think because you're big, we must go, small parties can do nothing. But I can tell you that, let's assume now if you've got a coalition government. We had a coalition government with the ANC in KZN. We had the mayor, they had the deputy mayor, we had the speaker, they had the mayor. That is what we did. But what did we do? We said, let's work, and my leader was alive then. What did we do? We entered into a memorandum that nothing will be approved unless we sit together and caucus and do it together.
What are the other threats?
Okay. Well, one is the issue of the financial resources, because people generally are hesitant to give smaller parties an opportunity. You will also have a problem as far as media coverage and things, media time and things is concerned, because it's based on your representation in parliament and you get airtime accordingly. So that is the second thing that's a threat or a negative impact it will have on political parties. And then the other thing is this. If you heard what people like Ace Magashule said, we are not going to allow you to rig these elections. Is he telling us what he knows, what happened in the ANC when he was there? Balula was saying something Zuma something very similar. Now, a smaller party finds it difficult to have party agents and things at every voting station all over the country, because that's where the elections are won and lost.
And threats in terms of your organization itself? Do you
No.
think there are, and a threat, I don't mean that there are nefarious elements, but in terms of the experience of the people involved, they haven't worked together before, do they all understand the vision? I mean, in the resources that they have in those terms, what are the internal operational threats?
I think the most
or difficulties, challenges?
The most important thing you look for in leaders, what do they want to enter politics in for? If they're entering into politics because they want a job, you're already moving in the wrong direction. If they want positions, you're already moving in the wrong direction. If people, I've had a person who said to me, who I initially thought I wanted to be the premier in case, and he said, no, we must give it to her. She's got the people on the ground. She knows and understands what people are going through. Now that is what you call leadership. So we've identified leaders on that list that will eat, sleep, walk, and talk serving the people, who understand that politicians...
But you've said this before when you started the NFP.
Yeah, I'll come there.
And that backfired quite badly.
Yeah, no. Let me say, who will eat, sleep, walk, and talk. The people who understand that we are the servants of the people, not the other way around. I've said this 20, 30, 40 times. People are misunderstanding. They think that, we are on the top and people, and it's not the case. But coming back to the issue we said, no. You see, first of all, I joined a party that was predominantly black. In fact, I was the only Indian representation. And I'm very lucky to have the support of my former leader to the extent that I survived. Everybody wants to know, how did I survive 10 years? It hasn't been easy. I've been attacked, I've been abused, I went through everything. And I went and been abused for everything because I wanted us to maintain that ethics and morals and values is what we said we're going to do for the people. You know, I was able to turn around and tell my mayor, you are doing corrupted things and I need you to stop right now. Now, if you don't do that, and if you don't have a leadership, a team of leaders that are committed to serving the people, you can't have one man and think you're going to win the race. You can't. You need a team, and that's why we've identified a team of leaders, selfless leaders, who will be committed and dedicated under the Allied Movement for Change to serve the interests of the people. We've got very experienced people in politics, in the legal sector, in the health sector, in the financial sector. We've got them from different, because when you're in parliament, you need to be able to understand the matter that's open for discussion. You need to understand what is affecting the people most. And you need to sit down and say, what is an alternative plan that can work? You can't be standing there and accepting everything that the majority party others just want to pass. If you look at the Bella Bill, for example, there are some good things in it, but there's some serious weaknesses in it as well. But the problem we have is that larger parties, and it's not about, to be honest with you, it's not about the interests of the people. What larger parties do, I'll give you a good example. LGBTIQ community, right? ANC supports it. The DA and ANC are enemies. The DA supports it. You understand? If you talk about alcohol, nobody in parliament other than myself is willing to talk about the devastating effects of alcohol in South Africa, which affects, what an impact it has on your budget, on accidents, on roads, and plus
billions, we've read those.
You understand? And more than the revenue you generate from. But the system, this capitalist system that they have introduced, what you need is a mixed economy where you can understand, you need to balance it. It can't be just based on money, you understand, but it's got to be on what is best for your people. So if you got the right kind of leaders, you can't go wrong.
Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam, Jazakallah khair for joining us. Before I release you, there is the camera.
Yeah.
You have 1 minute to say whatever you want to say, to whoever you want to say it. It's yours.
Well, Jazakallah for that opportunity. The Allied Movement for Change, which I am the president of, I can assure every South African citizen, this party is going to be different. Different from day one of Parliament, I can assure you. We know and understand the challenges that the country faces. We know where the country is going. But more importantly, we have the solutions to those problems. We've raised them many a times. We need you to give us the opportunity to work together with us so that we can find those solutions to protect the generations of today and the generations to come. To my brothers and sisters, your vote is very important in this election. Support the AM4C so that we can make a difference in our lives. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In conversation with Ahmed Munzoor Sheik Emam, Jazakallah khair. It was an honor and a privilege having you.
Thank you, sir.
Shukran to you.
In Conversation With is proudly sponsored by Africa Cash and Carry, Crown Mines, and shot on location at Kurtuba Convention Center.